Hey, what's up? Derek Kirk of Effectatron, and today, why did I say it like that? Hey, what's up? A very exciting tutorial today. Can I do that? Is that free yet? He's not made a tutorial in a while. So today's tutorial, basically, we're gonna make clouds, and we're not just gonna make like one individual cloud. We're gonna make entirely procedural, user-generated skies of clouds. So this is the exact one we're gonna make in this tutorial. I've created a VDB pack that you can download on Gumroad. It's available, but not only will you get all of those VDBs, you'll also get the project that we're creating today, which is basically a cloud generator. If you don't want the VDBs and you just want the cloud generator project that we're working on today, it's just $5. You'll get access to that, or you can become a member, join Patreon and or YouTube member, and you'll get access to some scene files as well as just exclusive content like the tutorial for how I created this island that you see in some of these renders. So you're not just gonna watch me punch in a bunch of numbers and end up with this result. You're gonna actually learn how to create it yourself and stuff. So I'll just show you how to create these clouds, how to texture them with an RS volume tag, how to light them, and then how to export them as a VDB on your own, bring them back in as a VDB so you can use Redshift volume VDBs and understand how to use those as well. So I'll show you all of that in this tutorial, but let's go ahead, get into it, figure out how to make it, and let's get started. All right, so let's just go ahead, open up a brand new project. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is create a sky and use an HDR light. So we're gonna use the dome light. So we'll click here and hold and go down to dome light. There we go. And then we're gonna go to the content browser and we're gonna type in sky. And here we go. You wanna make sure you grab the image media and not these materials or scenes here. Basically the image media is what we want because that's what we're gonna use to drive this. So we can go ahead and click one of these, zoom these in so we can see what we're looking at here. And what we want to do is we want to choose almost clear sky. Go ahead, click and drag that right in to the texture node here, right next to this. And boom, we've instantly got clouds. There you go, you're done. No, I'm just kidding. So this is just going to provide this even lighting throughout our scene and kind of a nice filler for the background objects for us. So let's go ahead and add one more thing, and that's going to be the infinite light. So we'll click and hold, and we're going to use an infinite light. And the reason we're going to use an infinite light is basically, let's go ahead and just throw in a cube here so you can see what we're dealing with here. If I turn off this infinite light, and we just see how our dome light is working, you can see that our light source from our dome light is coming here from the front. And so we just want to rotate this dome light because we want it to backlight our clouds for this scene in particular. So in order to grab the dome light and rotate it around, you kind of have to go to the view here and you just simply grab the Y axis, hold shift, and just rotate that around until we kind of have the lighting that we want. So we want to come in from like this angle, like behind our cube, and just kind of backlight it a little bit here. And then we're going to use our infinite light to match that basically. So we're going to take our infinite light and we're going to try to match that angle. And you can see this little white line. It's easiest to see in like the top view, because in this view, you can't tell what direction this thing's pointing. They've got to add a different icon for this because this little thin line is the worst. So here we go. We've got this line pointing this way, which is the way that our sun is pointing, but it's pointing perfectly straight. And we actually want it to be tilted down. So it's kind of like the evening or the morning, whatever, but it's not going to be straight out. So now we've kind of got that tilted down, as you can see here in our side view here. So we should be matching our skylight a little bit, which is very important. So you have the dome light there for that filler, and then that infinite light is really going to be able to drive and fine tune that. That way we can, if you want it to be a brighter day, we can come in here, crank that up if we want to. And once we get stuff in here, we're going to really see the difference there. And it's just going to help, with the actual lighting of our scene, because dome lights are great, but by themselves, they really don't provide the lighting that infinite lights and area lights and stuff can provide. So it's always good to kind of mix and match versus just relying solely on a dome light to light your scene. Things can end up looking a little flat, but they also can look pretty good. So just a little extra. Okay, so now we've got our lighting set up. All we need to do is now create our clouds. Let's go ahead and just go into this view. And we have a cube already that we've created, and this is exactly what we want because we're going to use this cube as the reference area for our volume, if that makes sense. So we're going to take our cube and we're going to just scale it out. So we're going to go with 1000 by 200 by 1000. And we'll go ahead and crank this up to 300. I think that'll be pretty good. So what we've done is we've created this cube, and everything inside of this cube is where our volume is going to be created. So if we threw this in a volume builder, we get like a solid volume shape, right? So the idea behind the way we're going to create these infinite skies is this is going to be kind of our area that we're working in. So think of it as like a piece of marble or something, and we're going to chisel away at it to create those fluffy clouds. So we have this area, and this is what we're going to be building inside of. So the first thing we want to do is we want to come in here and add a whole bunch of segments to this. And the reason we're doing this is because, oops, just 400, not 4,000. The reason we're doing this is because right now, if we threw this in and we threw some noises on it, we're going to get these really nice volumes and looking clouds inside, but everything's going to have a flat top when it gets to the edge of that square or that cube. So it's going to like hit these edges and be like straight down, and it's going to hit the top and be flat, and the bottom and be flat. The bottom of the cloud is okay to be flat. I think a lot of clouds kind of have that flat bottom sometimes. It's kind of nice. But you don't always want that. And so you kind of lose this illusion, and it's harder to blend them together when you make them VDBs and you want to clone them. You start seeing those hard edges, and it kind of breaks the illusion that it's an infinite sky. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a displacer on this to kind of deform our border so that when our clouds do reach the edge, it looks more organic and it's not like a hard cutoff. So what we're going to do is take our cloud and add a displacer. We're going to hold shift and add displacer. Shift, click, and hold, and that adds that displacer in there. That's in here. Sorry, I did that really fast. I've done this tutorial like 50 times because I've made a bunch of VDBs, whatever. So anyway, displacer, and then we're going to go into the shading tab here. I'm going to go to shader and go to noise. And you can see already this is kind of working, but we want to go in here to the noise, and we just want to bump this up to like 800. And really there's no hard rules, 600, and you can change the seeds and whatever you want, and change the noise type, wavy turbulence. There's no real rules on how these look. If you want them to be really fluffy, bubbly clouds, you know, something like noise might be nice because it's kind of nice and round. If you want to be like kind of rough, stormy clouds and they get to the end, you might want to do something like FBM, and that way they're a little distorted from the beginning. But again, you can always just play around with noises, just like always. We're just going to do noise because we're going to make kind of fluffy light clouds. I'm going to do about 400. Let's see how that looks. Yeah, that'll be fine. So we have this nice edge where we've got these nice bubbly things. We're going to go ahead and crank this up to 20. So now we have a little more variation in our surface and stuff, but we still have these weird hard lines, and that's because we're using a cube, and has no fillet to it. So we're going to go into here, and we're going to go to fillet inside of our cube settings. And we're just going to increase the scale of that until we get some more rounder edges here. And again, increase the subdivision there so that that's nice and round. So now we have these nice round edges. We don't have any hard shapes or stops anywhere in our scene. So when our clouds get to the edge, it's not going to look unnatural. Okay, so now we have this. We can go ahead and right click this and go to connect objects and delete because we're wild like that. If you don't want to delete it, just say connect objects and then it'll save you a copy of it so it's non-destructive. Basically, you can tweak it and replace it whenever you want, but we went gung-ho and we just deleted it too. So now we have our cube. It's editable. What we want to do is add a volume builder, which is this 3 squares right here that look like Cubert or something like that. So the way we're going to build this and the workflow is basically we're going to take this object as our base and we're going to start chiseling away at it with shader fields. It's basically like 3D noise maps that are just going to start cutting away at it, and we're going to layer those up in a way that creates these nice controllable organic shapes that look like clouds. And then we'll be able to change the seed and change the noise types and all this stuff and customize our clouds to however we want. So let's go ahead and add a volume builder, which are these 3 green blocks here. Now the volume builder is kind of interesting because it doesn't quite work exactly the same as all the other green modifiers inside of Cinema 4D. It does, but it doesn't. It also has an option that it doesn't have to. So normally you think, okay, I've got a green object here, a volume builder. That means I need to take the object that I want to modify and make it as a child of your object, which works. And this is probably what we should do to keep things similar because it can get kind of confusing otherwise. And what I'm talking about is, you see, we added this as a child here, and now we have this object inside of our volume builder down here. Now, if we wanted to, we could keep this outside of our volume builder and just drag and drop it into here. So if you have a bunch of stuff in like categories and things you want, you can do it that way as well. But just know it gets a little tricky when you start adding things outside of the volume builder that are inside the volume builder, and it gets a little disorganized. So let's just go ahead and keep our workflow and this as simple as possible and make it as a child of the volume builder. Okay, so now we just have our cube inside of here. We have the volume type by default is sign distance field, which is not what we want. If we want to make clouds, we need to use fog. So change that to fog. I feel like it should say fog or clouds or something like that for new users, because the whole like volume type stuff is just kind of confusing. Like, you want to make clouds with volumes, I guess, as a new user, but it doesn't seem the most user friendly. Anyway, so we've got our volume builder instead of here, and you can see when we change it to fog, we have all these dots here. So we're going to go ahead and go to the render view and take a look at what this looks like. So if we take a look at our render view now with all these dots, you'll see we actually see nothing. And that's because Redshift needs a material that tells it that this is fog in order to render that for us. So what we need to do is create that fog material, which we'll do really quickly. So what we want to do is we want to click our material tag here, go to create Redshift materials volume. Throw that on the volume builder, and you'll see nothing happens still. We need to go inside the volume builder, and inside the attributes here, we see we have the scatter channel. And underneath the scatter channel, or right beside the scatter channel, is a blank space, but more importantly is a box called presets. And this is where we're going to bring things in. So we're going to click presets, and here you have explosion, fume, turbulence, and this is where you can plug in all the things like color, temperature, smoke layers. This is where you would put your smoke layer if you're using a third-party plugin. But we don't have any of that. We just have volume builder. And the only option we have for volume builders is volume builder, but that is all we need. So we're going to go ahead and throw volume builder on there. And now you can see our product. And we have this kind of weird visual glitch where it's cutting off our layer. And I kept trying to figure out forever what this was. And eventually I just had to hit refresh, and that made it work. It's like it had like a certain amount of VRAM or something to allow it to render. So if your scene doesn't look right after you do that while you're in the IPR, just refresh it and it should fill that back in. So you can see we have a big chunk of a cloud, which is exactly what we want. And it looks kind of cloudy, but we can tweak the material here in a bit. But what we're going to do now is just work on shaping our clouds, and then we'll come back into this. So the most important thing we have going on for us right now is we have our lighting in our scene, and we have our clouds and our volumes reacting to that lighting, which is perfect. So it's a great spot to start. So what I'm going to do now is add shader fields, and we're going to start using these shader fields to start chiseling away at this block, because this block that we've created, this shape, is 100% thick volume all the way through, and we want to start chiseling away at that and making some pockets of it lighter, some pockets non-existent, some pockets 100%, and basically we're using 3D noise maps to create those organically and procedurally. So what we want to do is we want to use a shader layer. So click and hold this pink button, go down to shader field. And then we're going to do the same thing, click and hold that and drag that into the volume builder. So it's a child. And inside of our volume builder, this is where we want to edit our shader field. So you can see it's put it above our cube. And what we want to do is if we come in here, we see that nothing has really changed. And the way this is working is because by default, the creation space of this is a box. And the size of that box is 200 by 200 by 200. So our cube is much bigger than that. So we're not seeing that. This is happening inside of our cube here. So what we need to do is change our creation space from box to object below. And so that's going to allow it to start using this cube as that space. So right now we don't see anything because our shader field has no information. So double click that shader field to go down here to shader and choose noise. And now we're going to introduce noise back into it, and you can see how it looks slightly different. So what we're doing with this layer is we're creating just pockets inside of that cube shape so that it's not 100% solid. So we're going to go into our noise layer, and we're going to change our noise type from noise to wavy turbulence, and you can play around with whatever types and stuff you want. But you can just go by the images, and you kind of just want to look at these and feel like if they look kind of like clouds do. Basically, everywhere there's black, there's not going to be clouds. Everywhere there's white, there are going to be clouds. So start playing around with that and playing with the size and scale of things. Like for this, we're going to go ahead and increase the size of this up to 500 to start. And you can see how that's going to kind of shape that. But you see it didn't really change a whole lot here because we actually want to add it up even more. So we're going to change that all the way to 5,000. So what we're looking for are big pockets of change here. And we're going to go ahead and change the C to this up to like 668. I just want to make sure that you make the exact image that I made in the thumbnail. And then lastly, we're going to come down here and we're going to go to the low clip, bring that up to 31, and just to introduce some negative space there. And you can see, finally, we're starting to see some actual change that looks like good progress. As we're doing slow pieces at a time. Okay, so first layer, big chunks. Second layer is going to be smaller, and we're going to start fine tuning this more and more. And so we're going to go to contrast and up that to 20% as well. And so all we're looking to do here is just kind of create some contrast between white and black in an organic way that looks like clouds. So this first layer is kind of separating out where our clusters of clouds are going to be. And then we're going to start chiseling away at those individual clusters and then smaller and smaller into the detail. So this is kind of an organic shape, and obviously you can change the seed, get an entirely different look. But right now it doesn't look that great, but you can see how it's definitely working, and we're going to get there. Especially here where these pieces are cutting away, it looks kind of cool. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about really quick is voxel size. So voxel size is basically a 3D pixel. Think about it as resolution. Basically, if I come down here and I say a voxel size to 50, that's going to make it much bigger and chunkier. So everything is going to be like, okay, well, this is one voxel. It's this big, huge chunk. So we're going to end up with this really chunky scene. So you think smaller voxels means smoother definition. Think about it like subdividing 3D space. So if we started with 10, let's go down to 5. And you'll see it takes a little longer to render, but we're getting smoother edges here. But we're still getting like these weird stair step looking issues. So you might think, okay, I need to keep going smaller. And yes, it's going to get smoother, but that's actually not what we're going to need to do to get this look we're going for. 3 is a pretty good balance. What you want to do is you want to kind of find that area that's like you get the good general shape. There's still some weird stepping going on, but it's not so chunky. You're getting the shape you want, right? And you can go smaller, but the thing is when you start going too small, every time we hit, see, if you go too small, it pops up this thing. It's like, hey, the calculation time is going to be long for that voxel size. Do you want to do that? I'm like, no, I don't. So if I hit 2 here, let's do 2 instead of 3. And look down here in the lower left, you're going to see it's calculating a volume builder, and it's taking time. And so it's calculating that, and then it's going to re-update your geometry and then come back in. So the whole process is just going to take longer, but you're going to get higher quality fog. Now, this is looking pretty good. There's still some stepping going on. So if you want to keep trying to step down that voxel size all the way down to it's going to be smooth, you're not working in the right direction. You're kind of working against yourself. And I'll show you how to smooth that out in a bit. But we want to find that balance between getting the accurate shape we want versus render time. So we don't want to have to calculate out that much every time while we're tweaking it. So we're going to go with a voxel size of 3. It was pretty quick. Updates pretty quick. And it really does just make a big difference between just 1 and 2 centimeters for the voxel size. Okay, so now we want to start layering in more shader layers to create the look we want. So let's go ahead and add another shader layer. Shader field, click, drag, put that in the volume builder. Go back into the volume builder, go to our shader field, go ahead and choose noise. And we're going to start tweaking this, and we're going to realize it's not changing anything. That's because we need to go back into our volume builder, and we need to make sure on this shader field that we have the creation space set to object below as well. So that's going to still use our cube to create this. So what we want to do before we go any further is we want to change our mode for this layer and change it to subtract off of normal. So subtract, and you can see what that's going to do is that's going to start deleting everything. If you take a look inside of our shader field, you see that you can kind of see how this noise pattern is being affected in the 3D space there. Everywhere that's white is going to be deleted 100%, and everywhere that's black is not going to be. So there's not a whole lot of black, so it's really deleting a whole lot of this. So what we want to do is we just want to tweak this and kind of create it in a way that looks more natural. So what we want to do is we're going to change the noise type to FBM, and that's going to make it a little more noisy here. And what we really want to do is we don't want these little fluffy little tiny pieces. These don't look good. So we need to scale this up. So let's go ahead and scale that up to like 1000. Take a look at that and see how we are. We're looking better. Still not great, but definitely better. And let's go ahead and choose our low clip and crank that up to about 30. and see where we're at now. Because when we're doing our low clip and bringing that up, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, start bringing up those black values. So we're going to bring them up even more to like 40%. And that's going to allow us to bring back some of that noise. And so you can see now we have these kind of nice looking cloud pockets that are looking pretty good. Now we want to tweak this even more because right now our noises are really kind of uniform and in scale, and clouds and stuff really aren't. They're normally like a little elongated from wind and stuff like that. So let's go ahead to our relative scale for our noise, change it to 800 in the X and 800 in the Z, and then maybe just we'll take a look at what that looks like here. We'll let it update. Might be stretching them out so much that we're losing a little bit of that detail. So we're going to bring this middle one up to about 200. So now we have kind of these big, fluffy, stretchy chunks being cut out. This is perfect. This is exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and bring this down to like 500%. And this is really the method. It's just a lot of tweaking, seeing how it looks. So if we think we're, kind of deleting not enough here because we still have these kind of big chunks, we can come down here and lower our low clip again. And remember, lowering that low clip, introducing more white values is going to delete more. So you're just going to kind of want to get this in a range or an area where you're happy with the result you're getting. You don't want to delete too much because you still are going to start chiseling away at this a little more. But let's go ahead and just do like 30. And I think we'll be pretty happy with that. So we still have some big pockets, but we still have also some big fluffy clouds as well. Okay, and you can always come in here and change the seed and the noise and we'll be fine. But let's go ahead and go to the volume builder. And then once again, add yet another shader layer. Shader layer, bring that in. Make sure you go to your volume builder, grab the shader layer, change the creation space to objects below. And then in this one, we're going to actually change it to multiply rather than subtract. So what we're doing with this one is we've subtracted everything. We don't want to really subtract any more in that sense. We really just want to tweak the edges. So this is what's going to give us that displacement look on our clouds. Again, got to go to the noise, open that up. And what we want to do, you can see already our clouds are looking a little softer. Let's zoom in here. Let's just make this bigger so you can see. Okay, so we want to change our noise type from noise to stupple. And there are no hard, fast rules for this. These are just like trial and error, figuring out what looks good. Basically, these just look like nice organic shapes that I thought looked kind of nice from the clouds. These little pockets and these little hard ripples kind of gave it those little like puffs that you look for in fluffy clouds. What I ended up doing was using the seed 651. So, again, changing the seed gives you a completely different look. I just want to make sure that you can follow along exactly, but do whatever you want, play around with that. And then for the scale, if you see we increase this up to 500, we get these kind of nice wispy looks, which looks good. But let's go ahead and increase that all the way up to 5,000. You can see how that multiply is really affecting more the surface level of these clouds versus the actual whole clouds like as itself. So making this really big has just kind of softened up all of our clouds a little bit, which is exactly what we wanted to do. And then we want to come down here to the low clip and again, and bring that up to about 20 just to reintroduce that negative space there to really add a little more detail. And now you can see we've cut away at our clouds in this nice soft manner. So really we're just looking for just that little bit. And this is what's getting rid of that stair step issue that we were having. We're basically just like deleting our way out of that stair step issue. Now, when we let this render, you might still see some issues here, and we're going to handle that with another layer. And so again, what we're going to do is rinse and repeat, create yet another shader layer, bring it in, volume builder, inside the volume builder, go to the shader layer, creation space, object below. Okay, now we're going to double click that, go into our shader, do noise yet again, but we need to go back to our volume builder and make sure we set this to multiply as well. Okay, and so now what we're doing with this one's going to add those tiny little extra details. So if you see, we take a look at this with it off, just with the noise, just the default noise pattern, how we're kind of like soft. Here we have those little wisps, so we're looking pretty good. We've got these nice wisps going on. We've come a long way from our chunky block. And when we add this extra layer, you're going to notice it's going to cut away at it even more and really give you those little extra puffs to this. And we really don't want it to look exactly like this, but you can see how this is affecting it and what we're going to try to create. So what we want to do is we want to change this again off of noise. If you want like a fluffy cloud, noise is pretty good. But if you want more of that, like that disturbed cloud a little bit, I think FBM is one of my favorites. It just is basically noise, but with a little extra detail. It's a really nice one to go with. What I ended up doing was I went with the Seed 698. Again, totally random, but just play around until you get a result you like. And the main thing we did was we changed the scale here to 400. So rather than little tiny little cuts, you'll see these little chunks and stuff. We're going to start seeing that those clouds kind of thicken back up and piece back together. But we still have all these little pockets of these nice little details that we're getting from this displacement. And we can always play around again with the low clip and the high clip. 30 for the low. We're actually going to lower the high clip down to 80 just so we can kind of make sure some areas really don't get deleted and some areas do. So now we have these nice pockets of much denser fog, which is what we brought in here. And this is looking pretty good. We can always mess around with the scale and things. And so now we have basically our, cloudy sky created. Let's say I'm not liking how this is really looking. Let's go ahead and just go to our shader field here, our second shader field, which is our big pocket one. And let's change the size. Let's change the low clip of this back down to like 28 rather than 30. And that's going to just fill in some of these clouds because they're looking a little thin. Yep. That's going to fill that in a little bit. We'll go down to 25. Looking pretty good. And so now if we wanted to, we could just come in here and change the scale of this. We could try 800 instead of 500. See if we like the way that's looking. Pretty nice. Not awful. We can come in here again to the low clip and lower that down even more if we wanted to really bring back more clouds. The thing with a bunch of clouds is you want it, like naturally when you're building this, you think you want more clouds, but really thinner clouds is pretty good as well. But let's go ahead and crank that back up to 30. And then we can go all the way up to 40 if we want. There we go. So we've gone back up to 40 with that. We've changed our scale here to 800. And just to kind of bring back in some of those clouds. So we have pretty fluffy clouds here. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more thing that we can do to tweak this. And that would be to color our cloud and to set up how our cloud material is actually going to work. And then also on top of that, add a fog multiplier. I know it's a lot, but this is pretty cool. And that now we have completely procedural clouds where we can control and tweak them as we like. So let's go ahead and have this. We've got our cloud here. We want to change our scatter coefficient all the way up to 3. And what that's going to do is that's going to let that light really scatter and bounce throughout our clouds. So everywhere that was looking kind of real thin and stuff is now like, oh, actually there's a lot more light bouncing around. We have a lot more nice light puffy strokes going on here. And one thing I really like to do is I like to change this color from white on the highlight end and actually change it to sort of an orange, just like the slightest bit orange, like maybe 10%, 12% here in the orange value. Maybe too much, maybe just like 9%. Just kind of gives it that golden light look coming through, kind of like the sun's coming through there. And then what we want to do is we want to go in here to the absorption. And the way this is going to work is this is going to say, okay, how much is our cloud volume going to actually absorb our light? So when I set this up to like 5.5, you notice we get like storm clouds, right? So higher values mean it's going to kill off that light. And we're still going to kind of have some scatter going through, but it's going to be dark, right? So let's go ahead and lower that down to like 2.5. Maybe just like 1.5. I like the way that scatter was looking. And so now we see we've kind of thickened up our clouds in the middle, and we still have these where these clouds are thicker. We're still getting the dark areas here. And what I like to do with this one is I like to choose the high value here. And I like to change it to a light blue, just a little bit of a light blue like that. Do like a darker blue and like 6%. So that just kind of helps add that blue in that you kind of get from the GI of the blue sky that we're not really getting a whole lot of. So it's kind of just boosting that blue in contrast with this nice yellowy orange that we're getting from our light here. So it just kind of creates that nice cloud look. Again, these are all personal values that, just tweak whatever you want from these. We also can slide this down so we have a little more of that light coming in. Just slide that knot down a little bit, and that's going to allow that light to scatter through just a bit more. We're going to make it just the tiniest bit more orange, like 10%. There we go. So now we have this really nice, fluffy, white cloud look that's coming through, and there's a new feature in Redshift, which is the anisotropy of our clouds. And basically the way this is going to work, the way I would describe this is a kind of cloud fall off. So basically these little thin wisps and stuff are going to start getting a little less dense and stuff when we start using this anisotropy. So let's go ahead and take our anisotropy and turn it up to 0.3. And you're not going to see a huge difference right away. So let's go ahead and just show what this is doing. We'll keep turning it up. We'll turn it up to like 1. And you'll notice it's like instantly black. We'll turn it down to like 0.9. And you can see what this is doing. It's kind of making all of those thinner pieces more transparent rather than feeling, it's really thinning them out. So if we come down here and make it real low, we're just kind of taking those little bits that are like thin here and really thinning them out. So it's a little more apparent when we have an object below them and stuff like that. But it's going to help give it that realism that like you can really see through. It's like water vapor rather than a dense cloud at that point. So to counter that, you can also come in here, add a little more absorption so that you kind of get that balance between, you want the clouds in the middle to be thick, but you also want the edges of them to be kind of more like vapor. So you really start balancing all these things and figuring them out. And this is just, the color of this is bothering me so much. Slightest yellow. There we go. Really is like just a tiny percent. Yeah. And we also could come in here to our infinite light and tint it to the slightest bit of orange yellow, which would probably be the easier thing to do. And now we'll have that coming in as well. And we can crank this up. And obviously the way that the scatter and stuff works is it's affected by our light. So if we have a lot of light coming in here and our scatter is high, we're really going to blow out our clouds. So you want to have that balance between intensity of your lighting and your clouds as well. I don't want to think that you can just take these cloud material settings and throw them into any scene and they work. They're all going to be based on your lighting. So keep that in mind. That maybe your lights are too intense or whatever. And if you ever need to have a light be this bright for your scene, but you don't want it to affect your clouds that much because now it doesn't look good, because just the way you've set up your scene is kind of funny or whatever, just go to the details tab of your light and you can lower the volume attribute here. So you can lower that down to like 0.01, and now we're only going to get 0.01% of that light affecting our volumes. So we're still going to get power of that light on all of our objects, but not on our volumes. So if you have fog and stuff and your fog's like just blowing out, this is a really good way to fix that. So just so you know, inside the light settings. Okay, little tip. All right, so now we have our cloud. We've built it. We have it completely changeable. All we need to do is come in here. We can come into any of these values and just change the seed if we want, and we'll get a completely different sky. Let's go ahead and let that go. We can change the size, the noise type, whatever, the low percentage, the high percentage. And hopefully you understand how to control that in a way that's nice. And you can see here on the edge where we have our edge is hitting our cube, you can see how, because we have that displacement edge, it doesn't look that weird. And when we start tiling these together, it's not going to look as square. And you could also take your original shape, make it a disc or something to make it even less obvious that it's inside of a shape, but really cool. We're getting these really nice light fall-offs and stuff through our shapes. Our clouds are looking really good. So let's go back to our original here. And so what we want to do now is first off save our scene, because clouds are, we should always save. And so what we want to do is we're going to bring this back in as a VDB because we're done tweaking it. We don't want it to have to build it. We don't have to wait on this. We're good with the voxel size. We could maybe lower it down 1%. But what we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to use click and hold this button right here. And we have a fog multiplier. Okay. There's also a fog smoother, which we'll talk about as well. But we don't want to use the fog smoother because we've kind of set it up in a nice way that we don't need to. Like we don't, even though we're still at 3 centimeters for the voxel size, we're not getting that stepping that we got when we just had our 1 and 2 shader fields in here. You know, we have detail because we layered those shader fields in here in a way that created this nice organic shape. So the way the fog multiplier works, this is what I just threw into our object here, is basically it's kind of, rather than having to tweak your fog material for everything, you can just tweak this one volume builder object itself. So you can make some clouds, if you want it to be thicker and more of like a dark stormy cloud without having to go in and change all your settings, you can just say 1.6 or something like that, increase the multiplier, and basically that's going to say, okay, denser, boom. So now we've just thickened up our clouds 1.6 times, and pretty nice. So if you say, well, I actually want it to be any thinner and wispier, you can lower it down to like 0.6, right? So even less than 1. And so now everything's going to be light and thin and wispy. We can go all the way down to like 0.1 or something and make it really wispy, fog, haze. So now we just have really thin stuff going on here. So you can come in here and multiply it to whatever you want, and that's going to thicken up and soften your fog with the click of a button versus having to go into your shader and do all that. So you can make some adjustment tweaks to your object here without any real issues. Now, one thing I will say, if you are getting some weird stepping and stuff still going on in your scene, the fog smooth is probably going to be your best friend. So you can go ahead and click fog smooth, add that in there, and by default, it is going to smooth the hell out of your clouds, and you're going to lose all the detail that you worked so hard to build. So change the size, change the strength, change the type. Median's probably fine, and lower that down to like 10%. We'll take a look at that. But really, we don't need the fog smooth because it's just going to start erasing detail. But you can see with a little bit there, it does help smooth out anything where there were some issues with stepping or anything like that. So if you're having those issues, up the iterations and stuff, and this is going to be where you can be able to smooth out that stepping. So now we have this really nice cloud. We want to export this out as a VDB so we don't have to build it again over and over again, and we can just render it and we don't have to wait for it to build and all this stuff. So let's go ahead and do that as the last part of this tutorial. Have your volume builder selected. Go over here to File, Export, VDB, Volume.VDB. Settings, we want to have a preset of custom selected only. This is important. That way we're not doing everything, just our cloud. You can even do animations if you want. We could come in here to our shader field and animate the noise types and stuff and create like time lapses, stuff like that, looping animations. Really cool. So we've built it in a way that we can do all kinds of cool things, which is really nice. We could even come in here and make like a ring, a torus, and make a mushroom cloud. So we've set it up in a way that we can infinitely build clouds, which is nice. So we're going to go ahead and say OK. And then we're going to go ahead and save this as cloud from Tut in all capitals. I'm going to spell it wrong, like I always do. Cloud from Tut. Okay. Export VDB. All right. So now we're going to do something. We're going to hold Alt and click and drag and turn all of these off. Turn off our cube even. So we basically just shut off our volume builder so we have nothing in our scene. What we want to do is we're going to go to Redshift, go to Objects, Redshift Volume, RS Volume. Inside of the RS Volume, we have the file path here. And that is where we want to choose our cloud. So we're going to go to Clouds and Cloud from Tut.VDB. Bring that in. And you can see it just brings in this white box. So by default, it's a white box. All we need to do is go to the preview here and change it to points. And we're going to get a couple little points. And really, we want to do the prune threshold. We want to bring that down really low and increase the number of points. We can do like 0.02 or something. And so with the higher amount of points and a low prune threshold, we kind of get these little indicators of where our cloud is going to be. So again, throw your RS material for volume tag back on that volume, and we'll go ahead and hit render on this, and we'll have our cloud. There it is. Just like it was. Now, the cool thing is, now that we have this built, we can actually scale it, clone it, whatever. So to scale a cloud, if you notice when you have a VDB in and you try to scale, nothing happens. But if you change this from model mode to object mode, now you can scale it. So if you ended up having a scene where if we've made it 8,000 big or 1,000 big and we need it to be bigger, we can scale it way up if you need to, render it. We'll see what that looks like up close. Yeah, you can see where you can just fly around in our big clouds and everything looks fine. Looking good. Very, very pretty. And you can see how those noises are adding these little extra details and stuff in there. So you can play around with those. But already we get these really nice, beautiful looking clouds. And I mean, things are looking pretty good. So we got our RS volume. We can throw that in a cloner. And let's say render instance. And we'll just spread that out. We'll change our preview points down to like 100 so it's not freaking out. Cloner will spread this out. And so now we'll have these kind of spread out like this and sort of like that. We can have them overlap a little bit here. We can go into the MoGraph, add an effector and a random effector. I know I'm kind of flying through this, but it's not a tutorial on cloning. I'm just showing you real quick how we could do this. We can change the rotation on these so they're all kind of random. We can even affect the scale a little bit if we wanted to, but we don't really need to. I don't think the scale, I think the scale is fine. And so now what we can do is go to our object here and increase, this amount of these. Here we go. And now when we get render, we have an entire sky. So we can have like a plane flying through. You have to make sure you have it on instance and not render instance. I did that wrong. Instance will make it show up. But here we go. We have a huge cloud, sky of clouds, like just a ridiculous amount. We can go underneath it and look at it, whatever. We could fly a plane through this. We have just this really nice, infinite, huge cloud we can zoom in on. It's all detailed. And we didn't have to calculate anything because it's already a VDB, so we can already use it as, it's good to go. So you can fly through here all you want. Put stuff in there. Put a train in the clouds. That might be cool. I might should do that. That'd be fun. Put a train going through the clouds. But the cool thing is now we've got this. We can actually like layer this and make like a whole nother layer, vertically. And so now we can go like in between clouds. And which is really cool. So it can be like an airplane flying through that pocket of cloud blankets and stuff like that. This has been a long tutorial, but man, it's pretty cool. I'm pretty happy with it. And so, thank you for watching. If you learned a lot or something, please think about hitting the like and subscribe and ring that bell for more notifications, and also supporting the channel. If you want to join the YouTube membership or Patreon, there are multiple tiers where you get access to stuff. If you want to see, be sure to check out the link below for all the VDBs that we made, that I've made that you can download, and you'll also get the scenes so you have your own cloud generator. But basically, I have this project here with this island that I did, and if you want to learn how I made the island and the water shaders, become a member either through Patreon or through YouTube, and that content will be coming soon. There's going to be more like members only content. So this little island with these boats and whales and nice little, looks like subsurface scattering, but it's not. And how to put all these nice palm trees on this island and stuff. If you want to see that, become a member. All right, cool. Procedural clouds, and then how to take them to become an RS volume. Very, very cool. All right, thank you all for watching. See you next time.